Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
So, Aid, digital economy seems to be a phrase everybody's using. What does it mean to you?
Digital economy, first thing, I think it's a fundamental shift. It's a shift away from a kind of factory model to a model based around humanity, where people are more mobile, more social, their work and lives are more integrated, they're judged by their output, not the hours put in, and they find life and work more meaningful. So I think that's the big shift in moving from the industrial to the digital economy. Some of the drivers that are driving the digital economy today can be traced back to our hunter-gatherer, time. And the majority of our life, or mankind's existence, we've been hunter-gatherers. So we have been mobile, we have been social. Food didn't appear on a 9-to-5 basis. We had to chase it when we were hungry. Similarly in the agricultural era as well. And if we didn't come home with berries or animals, that was a bad day at the office, so to speak. So productivity was important, and we made decisions in real time. I think that's a critical thing. We were empowered to make decisions, and we had to make decisions when lunch turned a bit funny, for example, and started to chase us.
I love the fact you've used the word productivity in that context, right? Because I think that's part of the challenge we face today. Because, in today's world, a productive day as a hunter-gatherer would have been, I've been chasing that wild boar all day. Didn't catch it, but I've been all day, 10 hours I've been chasing that thing. And so the outcome of that is pretty pointless. I haven't actually achieved anything, but I've just done a bunch of process. And I think if I was to define one of the challenges I think the digital economy is going to fix, is this new sort of definition of what it means to be productive, which actually is going back to what it used to be, which is to make stuff, to actually have achieved something, rather than just to fulfill a bunch of process.
Dave, implications of the digital economy on the world of work, workers and leadership.
So I think the point of the digital economy is to give people choice. I have to say there's some disruption coming as well, so it's going to drive some change. From an organisation, it means being able to tap in to an element of the sort of the human capital that you have, the people that work for you, that quite often goes unnoticed. And these are the skills that we all have, but we never actually get to use at work because we're too busy just fulfilling this narrow window of our job description, so we can work in a broader way. And then it also affords us as an organisation the ability to do different things or to do the same things in very different ways. I think at the heart of this is a big cultural shift. And there's language about having a growth mindset. Every time you do something, you start thinking, well, what can I learn from that? What can I do to do it better, whether it was a failure or not in the great scheme of things.
Did you ever receive homework when you were at school that had 0 out of 10, fail, well done? I certainly didn't. We've been educated to be conservative, to be successful, to fear failure. And I just wonder how we get over this kind of fear of failure, because we're going to need to become very comfortable with it.
I think it's about time we woke people up to that opportunity for them to sort of embrace what they do. And it's about connecting with the purpose of what they do rather than just being a cog in a machine.
So perhaps, whereas the small, funky Silicon Valley companies are lean startups, the old established organizations are lean startovers.
Yeah, I like it, yeah.
Dave, what can organizations do to, if you like, transform to being a digital economy organization?
I think the first thing organisations can do is realise that we live in a fundamentally different time. And I know that's a really obvious thing to say, but the bit for me as a technologist is the people are different today, because people have this aspiration now about what technology could do for them. They walk into your organisation every day with high aspirations. So as an organisation, you've got this wonderful untapped potential about people who want more from technology. They want to do things differently. Your challenge is how you then feed that and how you guide that and steer it towards the outcome of the organisation that you're looking for.
And then there's this new generation of people coming through that want to change the world, and they'll use whatever technology is necessary to make that happen. How you manage both of those cultures is a big HR challenge. And that's why I kind of push towards almost having a startup version of your own organization to house those new creative and high energy individuals.
I think we need that mentality, that sort of start over mentality, but we have to do it across the organisation. Otherwise we risk alienating and sort of disenfranchising people.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting points there in that I guess there's always a danger of stereotyping millennials. It's not a qualification for future proofing your career to be young. It's having that creative, all of those skills we talked about in terms of innovation and so on. But by the same token, the older, dyed-in-the-wool type corporate suit, I don't think you can dip them in a creativity outside-the-box thinking course and expect them to turn into Lady Gaga overnight. And when you've got a workforce whose culture is based around process, take the banking industry, for example, creativity is actually a dirty word there. How you get them to be innovative when they've been judged totally on their adherence to process, that's a big challenge.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that.
Dave, what steps do we need to take to be economically relevant in the digital age?
I love that. I love that word relevant, Aid, because I think that's what this is all about, right? So to figure out the steps we need to take, we've got to talk about relevancy for a bit, right? What I worry about for organisations, and to a lesser extent individuals, is that in a world where the technology changes the opportunity for how we live our lives as individuals, the work we do, the industries we're in, our employees, our competitors, and maybe even people in their garages and bedrooms have an opportunity to completely disrupt what we're doing as an organisation. And so this conversation about relevancy, often we talk about what is it going to take to be successful in the new era. Forget being successful. This is about how are you going to survive, right? And that's what we have to get to when it comes to relevancy. It's really understanding that there is massive disruption coming.
So, reinventing yourself for the digital economy, treating yourself as a lean startup, treating your career as a lean startup, and actually sleeping with one eye open, a sort of healthy paranoia that you never go out of sync with the market.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It's about striking a balance as well, right? I think if you're running an organisation, or also like your angle about as an individual, is, what is it that I do today that I no longer need to do? Either because somebody else could do it more cost effectively, or actually it's no longer relevant in the way that we live our lives.
Our kids have been educated, but the schools are not prepared to educate them for jobs that don't exist yet. So that's a big challenge, but there are some generic skills that you can give the kids that will help them to survive in this unknown future. And that includes things like interpersonal, social skills, service skills, innovation skills, and commercial skills as we increasingly become more freelance and self-standing in the economy. So Dave, why do you think it's people and not technology that are central to the digital economy?
There's a short answer and a long answer to that, Aid. At the end of the day, it's people who push the buttons, right? So the technology is great, but unless the human beings are pushing the right buttons or using it in the right way, it's not for anything. But this really is about more than that. It is about the humans, but it's about their ambition to use the technology as something that extends their reach, something that lifts their capability in what they can do.
So we have to be very careful about who we give our attention to. And if we allow our attention to be consumed with Candy Crush or whatever, then our brain's not doing higher endeavour type things.
And I think one of the core life skills that we need going forward is to make that decision, right? So at any moment in time, make a decision. Can technology help me, yes or no? If it can, fantastic, pick it up, engage with it, do what you do. If it can't, turn it off, leave it alone. And I think that's the skill that we've got to start to adapt and see as human beings engage with technology, because then it starts to erode the stress that many people feel. We reach this place where the technology is just, it surrounds us and we feel overwhelmed by it. That's not what I want as a technologist. I want you to love the stuff that you use.
And the big challenge is two people given the same technology, one sits on YouTube all day, the other learns a foreign language or engineering or something like that. How do we encourage people to place their attention in a way that's in their own best long-term interests?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that makes technology so powerful. I mean, it's certainly why I gravitated towards it. So there's this great sort of democratizing effect. It's a leveler for society if it is accessible by everybody, and we equip them with the skills to make best use of it. And that's kind of what we should be looking for going forwards, is how do we spread the opportunity that it gives our society.
Dave, augmented humanity, what is this and what does it mean organisationally?
It's a great topic, Aid, and actually I think it's going to be one of the big trends of the next decade or so. And actually I'm seeing it referred to a lot more commonly these days as transhumanism. It's about what does that enable you to do that you couldn't do before. So it's really about, if we're augmenting ourselves with technology, it's got to be for a purpose, there's got to be some value in it for us as an individual or as an organisation. There's a lovely sort of bit of work that's starting to emerge as we start to understand humans a lot more holistically, rather than just, you know, work aid versus home aid. And they're starting to correlate, well, actually, I know that Aid is more productive when he is more relaxed, when he has better sleep and all that. Why wouldn't my employer care about that? You know, of course you would care about that. And if I can give the employees tools to help live a better life, be more productive both inside and outside of work, then that's a great value exchange. But the value has to be there and it has to be open and transparent. Otherwise you're just going to be a bit freaked out about it and nobody's going to want to do it.
Today, if you leave home without your mobile phone, you feel kind of naked. So we are kind of already augmented. You know, we're both wearing glasses. If we have cars, that's really just a kind of ill-fitting exoskeleton. So we've been augmented for quite some time.
We've been working with a police force to actually use the health data about an individual, so heart rate and all that, to assess whether you've got an officer in trouble or not, or whether they're in an area where they need assistance. So I think there are lots of other different ways where this data is going to be used that, again, you know, fundamentally benefits the human being monitored. So I think there's all sorts of stuff that we have to do. I think we have to focus on what's in it for the individual as well as the organisation. I think there's a whole new generation of privacy rules and legislation that we have to look at to make this fit for purpose for organisations and for individuals. But fundamentally it comes down to the same thing, I wonder, and see if you agree with this, but it's about us, right? And it's about what we choose to do with it. And let's choose to do good stuff with it. That's what we have to do. Today we've been talking a lot about technology and digital this and digital that, but the reality is the future that most organisations are going into is surrounded by change. So there's change from economic sense, so there's change from technology, change from political, change from security situation. Whole thing, everything is all about change, and not just on a small scale, massive scale. As a business owner, as a business leader, what do you do about that? How do you stay abreast of that? How do you try and figure out, chart your course against such a catalogue of change?
It's a really big challenge, and there's many moving parts. But I think one of the themes that we've seen recurring is it's all about people. And you might say that we're moving from, or we should move from, economics to anthroeconomics, i.e. economics that take into account human behaviour. And when you start to look at it from an anthropological perspective, if you embrace mobility, if you embrace real-time decision-making, if you embrace sociality, if you embrace work-life integration, if you embrace productivity as opposed to presenteeism, so to speak, if you build those into your business models, if you build those into the services you provide, you will essentially be aligning yourself with nature and making nature fundamentally your business partner.
If you're an organisation today, whether you're a big organisation, small, medium, large, doesn't matter, what do you think are the key trends that really organisations have got to start factoring in to think about how they're going to sort of prepare themselves for this future?
Well, I think some of the big macroeconomic trends are that the power is moving away from the employer to the employee, the power is moving away from the government to the citizen, and the power is moving away from the organisation to the customer. So this is going to require wholesale humility across leadership of organisations and governments, and the organisations that can adjust to that the quickest will win, in effect.
So that's a people-oriented change. What about technology? What are the technology trends that you would call out as being the ones to get really sort of, that people need to focus on?
Anything that supports the harnessing of what you might call dark assets. So that's kind of the Internet of Things, so to speak. very much an emerging trend. Robotics, a couple of years ago, science fiction. Today, we're hearing more and more about it. In the coming year or so, they'll be our work colleagues.
What's your position on data? Fuel of the future or completely overblown IT bandwagon?
Data management, very important. Information management, even more important, but collaboration management, most important.
Right, so to bring it all together, there's a bunch of stuff that's going to affect the humans, so people change. There is technology change in that we are going to see a world, an even more connected world that will enable us to add levels of intelligence to stuff that was never there before, and data will be part of that, but it's more what we do with the data rather than the data itself.
So my personal view is that the technology industry per se is dying, and the two phoenixes coming out of the ashes are the information industry and the collaboration industry. So you could regard that as the insight industry and the people industry. What is your take on the trends coming up in the near future and beyond?
I think there are some big things, some game changers that are about to happen. And the first is what people call the Internet of Things. So that's one, but again, that's just data on its own, that's useless. If you add to that another trend, another core trend, a trend of ambient intelligence. These are algorithms working on our behalf to make sense of that world of too much data, to gain insight and do things that deliver value, whether it's me as an individual or me as an organization. Then that starts to get an interesting space. And the final trend for me, and this is much more of a human than a technology trend, is we've got to start thinking outside in. So we typically think inside out. So I think about my product or my service or my company, and then we think about the customers that we're trying to understand. And what we now have to do is not just think about the customer, but how do they live their lives? What is it they do? What is it the other aspects of their lives that you should understand to give them that better experience? And when you know what is meaningful to the people you care most about, then you can figure out what to do with the algorithms and what to do with a world of lots and lots of data provided by Internet of Things or ubiquitous computing.
And organizations that can allow themselves to be vulnerable and be genuinely customer-centric, I think will be onto something. I think the CSR piece is going to move center stage because people are only going to turn up for work if they sense some greater meaning in how they spend their time.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually think the definition of CSR will evolve too, right? Because CSR can't just be about how much you give to charity or the IT team did an away day for a local charity. It can't just be about that. I think it's about purpose. I think it's about the purpose of your organization, which to me is, what is it that they affect in the world around them? What is it that you enable your customers to do? And I think when you engage employees with that purpose, that's when the magic starts to happen and they start to engage with the change program. They want more, they want to be part of what the organization does. So this move from CSR to purpose, I think, is almost like a societal brand. I think is going to be really interesting. No corporate video about the future would be complete without mentioning things like Uber, Airbnb, to name but a few. These are businesses that have come out of nowhere, are digital by design, and are disrupting industries on a global scale. What do you think other businesses can do, normal businesses can do, in the light of that kind of change and that kind of disruption, that kind of innovation?
So the question then is, well, what can big organizations do to incorporate some sort of social connectivity within their organization? How can they create social experiences off the back of those products? And if they can't, well, how can they create an environment that sits alongside their commercial business that allows people to get some social value from the brand? You have to take a view as to whether your offering is a global offering or not. And if it is a global offering, you need to get your brand set up as being the best in the world. But in some cases, it may just be the case of being the best in the village.
But if you're, and I think that's where I was going to go, because if you're a plumber in Stockport, your definition of global is different, right? Yes. Your definition of global is not the world. Back to my example of an accounting firm, it actually does open up their, geographic sort of coverage. Because now they could do stuff, certainly more broadly in the UK and maybe potentially internationally if they so wanted to. So if you were the owner or the CEO of one of these small and medium businesses, what's the one question you would be asking yourself about this?
I would be asking myself, how can I capitalize on new technology to make me even more agile and nimble compared to the big dinosaurs? Because if I'm smaller, we can make decisions more quickly. We don't have to work our way down hierarchies of management. So how can I capitalize on that? How can I be the velociraptor against the Tyrannosaurus? What can leaders do to capitalize on emerging business models to give them organizational advantage?
I think the most important thing for leaders to do is to get outside of their box. That does a number of things. So it creates insight into where the world might go. So really, leadership for me is about really taking a broad view on the future and then unleashing the potential of the people in the organization.
I think that's spot on. And I think in the past, leaders felt that they had to have all the answers. So strategy was created in the boardroom and edicts were sent out and filtered down through the organization. Increasingly, the wisdom is in the people, so to speak. So leaders that can harness that and to a large extent decentralize leadership, so decisions can be made quicker in the field at the time of opportunity or threat, the better. So I guess one of the big things is flattening the hierarchy. And the other thing is treating the workers as partners, as co-leaders to some extent, and then you're getting into the world of compensation and flexible working and actually enabling the millennials, for example, to go shopping in the middle of the day because they reserve the right to work between midnight and 3 in the morning.
So I would like to see, as part of this sort of leadership change, is let's focus on what means, what being effective means. So basically, what do we need to do as an organization to make our customers love us, to make love the stuff that we do, that they will buy more? And once you understand what effectiveness means, then you can figure out efficiency. And I think that's the balance, I think, for leaders to really get into, is that whole thing, let's get back to being effective.
So we basically, at the end of the day, need great leaders and great talent.
It's the death of managers, but the rebirth of leadership. And I think that's leadership for the 21st century.
Audio Jungle.